here from Roger Bear. And where are you tonight, Roger?
I'm at home in Tokyo at the moment.
Hello, Tokyo. Awesome. So, everybody, this is Roger, Bitcoin Jesus. He's in Tokyo. Everybody say hello. Hey. All right, Roger, if you just want to tell everybody maybe your story, because we love stories here, and say hello, introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm Roger Veer. I've been involved in Bitcoin for over 3.5 years now, which is well before the other traditional VCs or anybody else really started to get involved in a big way. But I started a business called MemoryDealers.com previously, and I put up the first Bitcoin billboard in Silicon Valley, and then I've been doing radio ads on Free Talk Live for anybody who's familiar with that program. And then Eric Voorhees and I put up the Honey Badger billboard as well, if you guys have seen that. And then I took some of the money that I had earned from MemoryDealers.com and invested that in over a dozen different Bitcoin startups, and I was kind of doing that before any of the other traditional VC guys were getting involved at all. So that's, I guess, how I came to be where I'm at today in regards to Bitcoin, and probably like a lot of you in the room today, once I understood the concepts of Bitcoin, I realized how amazing this is going to be for everybody in the whole world, and couldn't help but get involved full-time in it. And I've been involved full-time for 3.5 years now, and it's just amazing to see how far things have come in that time without any sort of central organization or control or anything at all. And it just really is a testament to what people are able to do when they come together with a good idea and voluntary interaction. We're able to change the world here, and we're right on the verge of really changing the entire world for the better thanks to the Bitcoin and blockchain technology. And I got to listen in a little bit to the talk that was going on before I joined, and I think it's real important too to realize that there's, I guess, two different types of Bitcoin wallets. There's a centralized wallet in which you're allowing somebody else to control your Bitcoins for you, and then there's a wallet in which you actually control the Bitcoins yourself. And I think it's really, really important as Bitcoiners who are in the know to promote to new users that they use Bitcoin wallets in which they're controlling their own Bitcoins. Otherwise, we can wind up with additional situations like Mt. Gox or government bailouts or bail-ins or all sorts of things that people who understand Bitcoin probably are not in favor of. So if you're using Bitcoin, use a Bitcoin wallet in which you control the Bitcoins yourself. So, and some good examples of that are Electrum, the Satoshi QT client, Multibit, and of course blockchain, which is the one that I'm spending most of my time on currently. So, and I'm not sure exactly what you guys want to hear about today in particular, but I'm happy to talk about any subject or answer questions or whatever you guys would like.
Q&A. Roger, just tell us what you've been up to for the last year, if that's cool. We've been traveling. You've been traveling a lot and stuff.
Yeah, there's been lots and lots of Bitcoin conferences all over the world, which is just kind of shocking. I'll tell you guys my very, very first experience with a Bitcoin conference was, I think, in September of 2011, and there was a guy named Bruce Wagner who had the Bitcoin Show on YouTube. And maybe some people will remember that, or if you want to have like a little bit of a Bitcoin nostalgia, you can go on YouTube and Google the Bitcoin Show. And he had a conference in New York at some little tiny small hotel, and maybe 100 people showed up total. And it was really, really, really such a small community at that point. And there were no iPhone apps, there were no Android apps. There were no online shopping websites. There wasn't really anything other than kind of this really good idea. But here we are 3 years later, and Bitcoin's just spreading like wildfire. I mean, the most popular travel website in the entire world, Expedia.com, is accepting Bitcoins now. Some of the most popular shopping websites in the entire world. Dell Computer is accepting Bitcoin. 3 years ago, it seemed like we thought it was going to happen, but it didn't quite seem real yet. Whereas now it's really happening, and I think in another 3 years, Bitcoin is just going to be ubiquitous all over the world. Considering that we've come this far, this fast, and this many people all over the world are working. And when I'm sure you guys feel it when you're in the room there at your meetup, just how much brain power is in the room and how many smart people are interested in this technology. And it's not just Vancouver, it's not just Tokyo, it's everywhere all over the world. When people hear about Bitcoin, they realize how amazing of a world-changing technology this is, and really smart people are getting involved all over the world and coming together to do all these amazing things with Bitcoin. So this is you guys feel it and I feel it, and this is a world-changing technology, and it's happening right now before our eyes, and all of us that are involved are making it happen. So thank you guys for getting involved, and what an exciting time to be alive and watching all this happen. So that's what I've been up to. I've been trying to speed that up, that process up as quickly as I can over the last 3 years, mainly by investing in different Bitcoin businesses and then trying to help those businesses. In particular, blockchain.info, because I really like the design of that wallet, how even if the blockchain servers go offline, everybody still has complete control of their Bitcoins. So even if governments or hackers don't like us, it doesn't really matter. Everybody will still have control of their Bitcoins, and I think that's real important to Bitcoin as a whole. We don't want to have any other additional situations like Mt. Gox.
Alex, go ahead with the question.
Okay, let's go first. You mentioned other blockchain projects a few minutes ago. What's the one you're most excited for of all the future blockchain projects?
One that I'm sure people kind of realize is coming, but maybe aren't fully as excited about it yet, is I guess there's two things. We have the CoinJoin privacy tool, which allows people to have some additional privacy. That's going to be revised to provide even additional privacy because it's not quite as strong as we would like. The stronger the better from our point of view. And what's really going to be convenient and exciting is we're going to have that built into the mobile apps. So you'll be able to use the CoinJoin privacy tool on your Android and your iPhone app here in the not too distant future. So I think people will really like being able to do that as well. And people should be able to have financial privacy. That's one of the things that regulators maybe disagree with. But one of the core developers at the Bitcoin conference in London the other week said that they're focusing on building a platform that allows permissionless innovation. And if you think about it, that's really what Bitcoin is all about. It's allowing people to send and receive money and to innovate without requiring permission from other human beings who they've probably never met. And that's what we're up to at blockchain as well. As we want to allow permissionless financial tools that just work for anybody anywhere in the world, regardless of where they happen to have been born or where they happen to be living. It'll just work, and they won't have to ask for permission.
Yeah, well, you just answered one of my other questions as well.
Next question, Alex.
With Jeremy Allaire making statements like Bitcoin needs to get away from its libertarian roots, do you see companies like Circle as a threat to Bitcoin?
No. If I thought Bitcoin was going to be able to be co-opted by people who want to control other people and basically use violence to control the lives of other people, I wouldn't have gotten involved in Bitcoin at all. It wouldn't have been interesting to me if I thought it was going to be able to be co-opted in that way. And maybe he really believes that when he says it. Maybe he doesn't. At the end of the day, Bitcoin's not controllable, and people, at the core fundamental protocol level, people have the ability to do whatever they want with their own Bitcoin, and nothing some regulator in New York City or Washington, D.C. or anywhere else says or writes any words those people write down on paper. It's not going to be able to change that. So, no, I'm not too terribly worried about that. And I'm sure lots of you there are working on tools as well to give people additional control over their own finances.
Alex, asking about Ethereum.
Yeah, one of my questions is pretty simple. Is what do you think about Ethereum?
I think it's absolutely amazing if Vitalik and everybody else working on it can get it to work. Talk about an amazingly powerful tool. I'm giving everybody in the world a computing platform that they can run any sort of software on they want that can't be stopped or shut down or turned off. Like that. And I've been struggling as to which is more exciting, Bitcoin or that, and maybe it's Ethereum. So getting it to work is going to be the hard part, but the idea, the cat is out of the bag now. Somebody's going to figure out how to actually make it work. And I saw Vitalik in, I think it was Beijing a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, and he said he was pretty close to having it all up and working. And to be honest, I've been focusing on Bitcoin with 99% of my time, so I haven't read a huge amount about Ethereum, but someone's going to get it to work, and I'm sure lots more exciting things will be done with Ethereum as well. So I'm excited by it as well, is the short answer.
Roger, since you've been focusing on Bitcoin, what comments might you have about the governance of the of future releases and things like that? What is your opinion about how the community should decide on the governance model for future releases of Bitcoin?
And ultimately, at the end of the day, the people controlling the mining power decide. And individuals own a lot of the mining equipment, but a lot of them are pointing it towards different mining pools. So I guess it's mainly like an educational thing. Is we have to like explain people what the options are, and then hopefully people will choose the side of what I'm in favor of is making sure that everybody has complete control over their own finances no matter what. And I think that's pretty likely to continue to be the case because you destroy a huge amount of the value that Bitcoin brings if that's not the case. So everybody should be in there. I think their incentives will be aligned to continue to have that be the case. And I imagine pretty much everybody that's showing up to Bitcoin meetups there are pretty similarly aligned as well.
Let me ask my foundation question. Okay, what do you see as the current role of the foundation? How well are they fulfilling that role? And what would you like to see their role be in the future?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions rolled up there in one. So personally, my history with the foundation is myself and Mt. Gox actually put up the money to kick off the Bitcoin Foundation. We both put up 5,000 Bitcoins apiece to do that. I would like to have seen up until now the Bitcoin Foundation taking a stronger stance. It's basically supporting individual rights and individual freedom, and they haven't been opposed to that, but they haven't been taking nearly as strong of a stance in regards to that as I would like them to see. So we'll see. The more competing foundations, though, the better. I don't think that there should just be one single Bitcoin foundation that's the monolithic voice for all Bitcoiners. The more organizations, the better. But I would like to see whatever foundations exist. I want them to come out in favor of individual rights and giving people the fundamental human right to innovate without permission. And to me, that's what I see Bitcoin and Ethereum being all about: is giving individuals the right to be able to do anything that's peaceful and not have to ask for permission from other human beings who they've never met and who have never met them. And just because those human beings work and wear fancy suits and work in buildings with flags out in front of them, I don't think that gives them any more rights than the rest of us. And for me, that's what I see Bitcoin is all about. It's a leveling field, and it puts all human beings everywhere on the planet on the same platform or on the same level there, I guess. And I would like to see the Bitcoin Foundation speak out a little bit more in regards to that and basically say, like, Bitcoin is for everybody, and it's not for any single group of people to control.
Hi, Roger. I have a question for you as it pertains to Bitcoin.
Speak loudly, please.
A question as it pertains to Bitcoin giving equal opportunity to everyone around the world with the centralization of mining and low-cost, cheap power coming from a very finite number of geographical locations, which are directly tied to the economies of those locations. Centralization is really inevitable. So I mean, obviously now it's feasible for Bitcoin from the economic perspective, the incentives are there, but how about when mining rewards go down, transaction fees go up, and this centralization trend continues? And this is coming from myself as an industrial miner.
So what was the question there?
The question is more how is Bitcoin going to cope with centralization through economic incentives to centralize in low-cost power centers?
Yeah, hopefully there'll continue to be lots of decentralization there and lots of different jurisdictions with low-cost power. I know there's a bunch of big mining operations in mainland China, and there's some up in Washington State, and then there's some actually on like islands in the Caribbean. And the more spread out it is, the better is the short answer. I don't have the miracle, Bitcoin Jesus solution to that, but lots of smart people are worried about that exact issue, and I am pretty confident that people will be able to figure out how to make sure that doesn't become a problem in the future, because there's around $8 billion worth of value on the line currently, and I think that's a pretty big incentive to make sure that Bitcoin continues to be decentralized, because the instant it becomes centralized, it's not really useful anymore, and I think the value would plummet because of that, because people would realize that. So the incentives are aligned pretty well to make sure that Bitcoin does stay decentralized.
Roger, why are you in Tokyo?
The super short answer is girls. that was long ago. So. I'm married now and happily living in Tokyo. But my view is, if you look at the world from outer space, there aren't these national borderlines. And if you think about it, it's just lines that brainwash people with guns are willing to shoot people if they go from one side of this imaginary line to another. Hopefully Bitcoin is going to help bring about a world in which any human being is allowed to travel anywhere else without having to ask for permission from people who've never met them and have never met them before either. And I see Bitcoin as a big step in regards to that. So I think people should be allowed to live wherever they want. And Tokyo is a nice place. So.
Tell us the story of when you met your wife. Let's hear about let's hear a personal story. When did you meet your wife?
Actually, let's see, a long time ago now, in California. Actually, she was a student at San Jose State University, and I met her. Shoot, how many? Like 11 years ago now, or 10 years ago. We dated briefly, and then I moved to Tokyo. She stayed in California. Dated a lot of other girls in that time in Tokyo, but then realized that she was the best one that I could trust and really got along with the best. So yeah, she likes to keep her life private, so I won't go into too much detail there. But I'm really lucky to have her in my life. Is the short answer.
All right. Roger, can the state and Bitcoin coexist?
Can the state and Bitcoin coexist? Yeah, there's always going to be robbers and thieves and muggers in the world, even in a world with Bitcoin. So yeah, the state will still exist.
Will taxes coexist with Bitcoin?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that last question.
Well, will taxes coexist with Bitcoin?
Taxes.
Will taxes coexist with Bitcoin?
Yeah, you guys are asking all the questions that are the ones that I'm extra interested in, but sometimes extra scared to talk about. I think a lot of taxes are going to disappear because of Bitcoin. I also think the state will become much smaller because of Bitcoin for two reasons. One, governments won't be able to just print money at will. And maybe some of you, based on the questions I'm hearing, are already aware of the fact that one of the things that had me so excited about Bitcoin is as someone who was born in the U.S. and grew up as an American, I watched the U.S. government just print money like crazy, and then they would use that money to buy guns and tanks and bombs and airplanes, and then go and attack all sorts of people all over the world. And if you think about it, what war really is it's one group of strangers in your country that you've never met and who've never met you. If you're in the military, right? It's one group of strangers in your own country telling you to go and kill other strangers in another country. And that just seems absolutely crazy. Why would you go and kill strangers because other strangers told you to? Like, that's wrong. Don't do that. It should be simple common sense. But I think a lot of people haven't taken the time to think about that. And then the way all this is paid for is through inflation for the most part. Like 99% of it is paid for via inflation. And if the world starts using Bitcoin, governments aren't going to be able to just have this free printing press to print money and be able to use it to fight all these wars and murder people all over the world. And that was one of the things that had me so excited about Bitcoin, is that they're not going to be able to do that. And then direct taxation is going to be a lot more difficult as well. People that want to be able to hide their income are going to be able to do that with Bitcoin, and I think that's a wonderful thing. People own their own bodies, and as an extension, they own their own labor and the income that they're able to earn with that. And I don't think that just because people get together and take a vote or work in buildings with flags out in front and wear fancy suits, I don't think that means that it's okay for one group of people to tell other people that, no, you have to pay for this or we're going to lock you in a cage if you don't. I think if it's a good idea, people are more than willing to fund it voluntarily. And the Bitcoin Foundation is an example of that. People thought it was a good enough idea, and they're giving money to it, and things are getting done. There's all sorts of private charities. Bitcoin100.org is another good example. People have donated a bunch of Bitcoins to that, and they'll donate $1,000 worth of Bitcoin to any secular charity that starts accepting Bitcoin and displays Bitcoin prominently on their website. And these are all examples of people coming together and donating money voluntarily to get things done. One common objection people have a lot of times when you hear about the idea of maybe we don't need a government, they say, well, who will build the roads? And there's a great video on YouTube by a man named Larkin Rose who's talking about that. And he pulls out his cell phone, and here's my Android for Android lovers. I have both, right, the iPhone, but he talks about the cell phone. He goes, think about it. With this device here in my hand, I can contact just about any other human being anywhere on the planet almost for free and have a conversation with them in real time or send pictures or videos back and forth with them, and all pretty much within the affordable reach of just about anybody as well at this point. And this was all done by private individuals and private companies coming together to create this technology. and you're worried that if we don't have a government, human beings aren't going to be able to come together and figure out how to build a flat spot on the ground. And just think about how much more complicated building this is that allows you to communicate with anybody anywhere in the world than it is to build a flat spot on the ground. So when you're worried about who would build the roads without governments, just think about your cell phone and how complicated and amazing that is, and that people came together voluntarily to be able to create that. It seems pretty darn clear that people will be able to come together to build flat spots on the ground for people to use. So as far as governments and taxation and Bitcoin, it's going to be really hard for them to collect sales tax from people who don't want to pay it. It's going to be really hard for them to collect income tax from people who don't want to pay it. The main thing that they're still going to be able to collect taxes on, I think, are property taxes and things that are attached to physical, meat space items. But I think a lot of people are going to speak up a lot more when the taxation is much more clearly exposed and people aren't paying for things indirectly through inflation. When governments print money, they call it fancy things like quantitative easing or economic stimulus. If any of the people on this call print money, they call us counterfeiters and lock us in jail. But it's the exact same thing and has the exact same negative effects on everybody else. So that's one of the things that's so wonderful about Bitcoin, is that people can't just create them out of thin air. But that's also why it's so important to advocate that people don't use centralized Bitcoin wallets that allow fractional reserve Bitcoin banking. And we'll see how that plays out. And more centralized Bitcoin wallets are starting to get some traction. But if you're a true believer in Bitcoin, I think it's pretty clear that you should be holding your Bitcoins in a Bitcoin wallet in which you control the private keys. Or if you're running a centralized Bitcoin wallet of some sort, provide some transparency and proof of like 100% Bitcoin reserves as well. I think that's really important in Bitcoin. So that's the end of my rant on that.
Any more questions?
Yeah. Roger, can you share with us your journey into voluntarism? When did you first come across the ideology?
Yeah, it was a gradual process. Although, like my parents are not voluntarists or particularly libertarian at all. They're kind of run-of-the-mill, like centrist Republicans in the United States. But I do remember one time, I must have been pretty young, maybe junior high, like sixth grade or something like that. And on the news in California, there was a ballot proposition to raise cigarette taxes, or it might have been a national thing. I don't remember because I was so young, but it was something to do with raising cigarette taxes. And in the media, it was saying all the additional cigarette taxes are going to be used to fund the public schools. And I asked my mother, like, what do you think about the cigarette tax increase that's on the ballot? And before she answered me, she said, what do you think? And I said, well, I go to the schools, so I'm in favor for it because the schools will get more money. And my mother looked at me and said, And I said, well, what do you think? She goes, I think just because some people decide that they want to smoke, they shouldn't have to pay more money than other people that decide not to smoke. And that maybe was kind of like the first seed that kind of got planted back in the back of my mind. And then I got a little bit older. Maybe I was a freshman in high school, or maybe the summer before I started freshman year in high school. I was bored in the summertime. And I looked on a bookshelf, and I saw a book called Socialism by Ludwig von Mises. And some of you guys there may already know who he is. He's kind of the father of the Austrian School of Economics, who's in more recent times kind of been championed by Ron Paul. But I picked up this book, and I knew that Americans were supposed to be opposed to socialism and were supposed to be capitalists, but I didn't really know what either term meant. And but I figured since I was supposed to be a capitalist, I should at least hear what the other side had to say. So I picked up this book called Socialism and read it, thinking that it was a pro-socialist book. But in reality, I think it was the Wall Street Journal that summed up this book as Ludwig von Mises's devastating critique of socialism. And the basic ideas outlined in that book is that government central planners can never have enough information to know what resources should be used to produce what goods. And it's the pricing mechanism. Like everything has a price set in the free market, and that's what tells producers what goods should be produced out of what resources. So it's because asphalt or rocks are cheaper than gold is the reason that we know to pave streets out of asphalt instead of out of gold. And it's how we know what resources should be devoted to producing what goods. And it's this pricing mechanism that allows all however many billion people are on the planet today to be able to communicate with each other via the pricing mechanism to allow them to produce the most goods for the least amount of resources and make the world a better place because of that. And after reading that book, you realize that no government central planners can ever have the same sort of knowledge as, how 6 billion people or whatever we're up to now on the planet, all individually. Like, everybody knows what's going on in their own life, and these pricing signals transmit information all over the entire planet as to what goods should be produced out of what things. So that's why, even in communist Russia, they had to look to the West to see what goods were being produced out of what things, and they would mimic it in Russia because they didn't have a pricing system to transmit that information. So they had to look to the West to figure that out. And it was after reading that book then I found, Milton Friedman, and then Frederick Bastiat's The Law, and then from there, at some point, I found Murray Rothbard. And it was reading Murray Rothbard that really, really, I think, started to open my eyes. And for anybody who hasn't read Murray Rothbard, I really recommend going and picking up any of his books. And one of the things, I was a high school student when I was reading this, and there was, in the U.S., there's always some political talk about bringing back the military draft. And everybody just kind of assumes that, yeah, maybe it's just fine to have the draft. But Murray Rothbard pointed out so incredibly clearly that the draft is the moral equivalent of kidnapping and slavery. And if you think about it, the draft really is. It's kidnapping people and then enslaving them, forcing them to go to some far-off country and then fight against their will, and if you don't, you go to jail. And it just seems really shocking to me that none of my teachers in school or none of the adults around me had ever pointed out that, everybody knows that kidnapping is wrong and slavery is wrong. But without any doubt, it's indisputable. The draft is the moral equivalent of kidnapping and slavery. And then you hear all these politicians in different governments around the world saying, oh, we need a draft. And if you stop and think for a minute, these politicians are advocating kidnapping and slavery on a grand scale. Millions of human beings they want to kidnap and enslave. And I thought to myself, why would I ever want to support any human being that's advocating kidnapping and enslaving other peaceful human beings? Like, that's just craziness. And anybody who advocates kidnapping and enslaving others does not deserve my support. And so that was kind of one of the, I guess the final straw that broke the camel's back in my support for any sort of government. These people want to kidnap and enslave people on a grand scale and think it's perfectly acceptable to do so. I want absolutely nothing to do with that sort of thing. And nobody had ever pointed it out to me, and most people still don't talk about it when you hear debates about having, mandatory, youth service in the U.S. I think Obama's been advocating that sort of thing a bit. That's kidnapping and slavery. And even if you're enslaving the people to do good things, maybe build, roads and bridges or do things like that, it doesn't change the fact that it's kidnapping and slavery. 100 and something years ago, picking the cotton was really important in America too. Cotton has to get picked, but it doesn't mean it's okay to kidnap and enslave people to do that. And it's the same thing today. So I guess I had my bubble burst, and now, anytime any group of people wants to get together and force other people to do things against their will, that's wrong, and I don't support it, and that's what governments are all about. It's about forcing people to do things against their will. And if the things that governments are wanting to do are good enough ideas, people are going to get together and do it voluntarily. You don't have to force them at gunpoint to do that or threaten to lock them in a cage called a federal prison if they don't comply. For things that people value, they're willing to spend their money and time to do it, and Bitcoin's a wonderful example of that. Look at how many millions of people at this point all over the world are coming together and devoting their time and money and resources to developing this thing called Bitcoin that we all think is a good idea. So that's, I guess, kind of a short version of how I came to being a voluntarist. But the short answer is, the draft is the moral equivalent of kidnapping and slavery, and taxation is the moral equivalent of theft. And I don't support stealing, kidnapping, or slavery, and that's why I don't support governments.
I got a quick question on that tip, Roger. What about the argument where, like, countries that have manual conscription for 18-year-old gentlemen and women in some nations, they seem to have a tighter framework socially, generally, you know what I mean? Like, we look at nations that don't have any conscription for people when they leave high school, they seem a little bit less organized or chaotic, more chaotic, and just generally less productive. What about that sort of thing as an argument? Like, look at Israel, Switzerland, Germany, you know what I mean? These nations have amazing GDP, output, and they're quite civilized to a degree, especially.
North Korea.
Yeah, okay, no, okay, let's keep it to the free world, right, for the sake of argument. What do you think of that? Like, look at Germany and Switzerland as a primary example. You know, like, go ahead.
So even if I were to concede all your points, like let's say that all those things are true, I think the more important question is it okay to kidnap and enslave people to achieve those goals? And the answer is pretty clearly no. But I actually don't concede all those other points as well. So I think if you look at it, North Korea, I think could be argued has 100% conscription of everybody all the time. South Korea just has it for a couple of years. If you look at before the Berlin Wall came down, you had East Germany and West Germany. In East Germany, the government controlled everything. In West Germany, you had a lot more economic freedom, and in West Germany, you had the economy did much better. You had them producing Porsches and Mercedes and BMWs and all sorts of things that the world wanted. In East Germany, all they were able to produce was a big giant wall to prevent people from escaping because things were so bad there. So, and even in the United States, back when the U.S. had slavery, a free man's labor is much, much, much more productive than a slave's. Free people are going to work hard because they get to keep what they earn, whereas a slave is only going to work hard enough not to be beaten by their master. And look, if for anybody who served in the military, ask them. Look around. People just kind of do things halfway because they don't care, and they just do it well enough not to actually get in trouble for the most part. Whereas ask any business owner or anybody gets to keep what they earn. They're going to work a lot harder because of that than in a situation in which they don't get to receive any of the benefits for what they're working for. But for me, the more important argument though is that it's not okay to kidnap and enslave people, even if it were to lead to additional GDP.
So what's the value of a sense of discipline on the collective level?
Some people maybe value that, other people don't, and I think that's an individual thing. So, and for those that value that sort of discipline on a group level, go ahead and participate in the group, but don't force people who don't want to participate.
Right. Very good. Alex?
Let's go into the future.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Back to Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. Bitcoin. Yeah.
What-
So there's a clear need in the third world, the unbanked part of the world, for Bitcoin. But what do you see as the main thing needed for Western adoption?
What is the main thing for what in Western adoption?
Western adoption, because it's obvious in the third world why they need it.
Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? That's for all of us working on Bitcoin to figure out and create the tools. So the main things I think we need are easier to use smartphone wallets and like dumb phone wallets, like text messaging based wallets. And all the exchanges and that sort of thing are coming along. But once we have even just one or two really firm solid Bitcoin exchanges to have a solid price, and the market cap will have to be much bigger than it is now. Once you have that, even if it's only in Dubai or Hong Kong or Singapore or one or two freer countries in the world, as long as the rest of the world has access to easy-to-use Bitcoin wallets that are safe from hackers and thieves, both private and governmental, Bitcoin is going to be able to be ubiquitous at that point. Because even let's say you're living in an oppressive regime somewhere. If you're able to get a Bitcoin wallet, even if there's no actual Bitcoin exchanges within that country, everybody will still be able to know what the price of Bitcoin is. And just like there's black markets for physical cash or gold or other things in countries, there's going to be Bitcoin black markets in those countries as well. And another little side point, a lot of you guys may already be familiar with Patrick Friedman, who's the grandson of Milton Friedman, the son of David Friedman. He's actively pretty involved in the seasetting stuff and just all a real interesting guy. I saw on his website maybe a decade ago he had a bumper sticker on his car that I really liked. And most people around the world are in favor of free trade. Pretty much everybody who studied economics realizes that free trade benefits everybody and is a good thing. And he had a bumper sticker on his car that said, "Support free trade, smuggle." And if you think about it, smuggling is free trade. And just because some people get together and write down words on a piece of paper and say you're not allowed to buy or sell this good without this permission from us or paying this money here, smugglers are engaged in free trade, and so smuggling is free trade, and Bitcoin's going to allow a lot of that. But everybody kind of thinks that, oh, smuggling is bad, but free trade is good. If you think about it, it's really the same thing. And so I'd like to thank Patrick Friedman for pointing that out to me in the form of a bumper sticker. But Bitcoin is going to enable a lot more free trade all around the world, and we're already starting to see some of that.
Roger.
How will Bitcoin help indigenous communities in places like the Amazon that's being decimated at the moment?
They'll need to have some phones to be able to do it. I would guess, I've never been to the Amazon, I've never met any of these people, but I would guess, and this is just pure speculation on my part, but I would guess most of them would rather have laptops and computers and live a more first world lifestyle and have a lot of the luxuries that all of us enjoy in our day-to-day lives. I would guess most of them want that. I don't know for sure, that's just speculation on my part, but hopefully lots of Bitcoiners and other people that care about that sort of thing will get together and be able to help those people achieve the things that they want in their lives as well.
Roger, who are the leaders in the Bitcoin community that you think are worth following right now?
The Winklevoss twins are not. People I really enjoy and like Eric Voorhees, of course. I met him at that very first Bitcoin conference in New York, and I didn't know who he was, and he knew a little bit about who I was for my support for the Free State Project up in New Hampshire, and it was really interesting. He came up to me and he said, "I think we should talk," and I said, "Okay." And he handed me his business card, and his business card just had his name, Eric Voorhees, and his phone number and email address. And on the back of the card it said, "I'm friends with Satoshi." And I thought that was a very memorable business card. And I'm sure you guys have probably read some of his articles, or if you haven't, I really recommend you read some of the things he's written on Bitcoin or listen to some of the speeches he's given. He's just an absolutely amazing writer and a wonderful voice for human liberty and Bitcoin in general.
Awesome. We have 2 more questions, if I may. Sorry, Roger.
Sure.
Jacob, speak loudly, please.
Roger, as one of the most influential users of Bitcoin itself, what have you found that Bitcoin doesn't do and doesn't solve, and what needs to be worked on? Like, I mean, Bitcoin by itself is a great thing, but like, what is one thing? What are the things that have not been solved? Right?
Shortfalls.
Yeah. Blockchain size, of course, now it's becoming more centralized. Mining is becoming more centralized. I don't think those are fatal flaws or anything, but those are just things that we should keep an eye on. I guess the thing for me, and I think one of the biggest problems actually is when I explain Bitcoin to people who don't already know about it. And I remember I had this experience. I was with Eric Voorhees and a couple of other people at a Liberty Forum event in New Hampshire. And for those who know who Tom Woods is, another economist and a big Bitcoin proponent at this point. But we were there explaining Bitcoin to Tom Woods. It was me and a couple of other guys, maybe 4 or 5 people total, and we were in a little booth in a restaurant explaining explaining Bitcoin to Tom Woods. And his reaction to us was, if Bitcoin is this good, why isn't everybody shouting about this from the rooftops all the time everywhere? And our impression is like, they should be. It really is this good. So I think one of Bitcoin's biggest problems is that it's so good and so amazing that people think this must be too good to be true. It can't be true. It can't be real. Nothing this good can exist. But once people realize that it really is that good, then they're like everybody else, in the room there with you guys. They realize it is that good, and I have to get involved full time because it's that exciting. So that's one of the biggest problems, I think. And then I think fear of hackers and hackers. That's a big thing. I consider myself to be pretty decently computer savvy, and even I, in the back of my mind, I worry. Am I going to get hacked? Am I going to have my Bitcoin stolen at some point? And my advice to everybody is don't keep all your Bitcoins in one Bitcoin wallet either. Make sure you're keeping your Bitcoins in wallets in which you control the private keys, but don't put them all in one wallet. Have multiple different wallets so that even if, worst case scenario, one of them does get hacked, you still have your other ones. So, but yeah, those are the things that I guess concern me the most about Bitcoin: is centralization of the mining, the Bitcoin blockchain bloat, and then just hackers in general. But all of those I don't think are insurmountable problems at all.
So, Ren, question?
Last question, Roger. It's Ren from SatoshiVote.com.
Oh, hi, Ren.
Yeah, Ren's actually the gentleman that set us up with you, Roger. So thank you very much, Ren. That was very cool.
No worries. I was wondering if you were willing to list a campaign on SatoshiVote.com, and if not, what would I need to do to improve the site for you to list a campaign?
Yeah, maybe we can all brainstorm in the room right now what the right campaign to list is.
All right, let's do that. Who's got an idea? Brad, tell everybody about Satoshi voting, please.
So basically, right now it's hard to do, but I'm doing it anyway.
Stand up.
And it's a site that encourages people to send $1 a month to whatever they support. And obviously that's kind of hard to do with wallets that you hold the private keys, but unfortunately there's some wallets that are centralized that have that function built into it. So right now, Coinbase.com is the wallet that people can use for this. But basically, you would list a campaign and ask for almost any amount of money you want, but the pool of funders is probably about 100,000 people around the world. So say you want $5,000 a month to put towards anything, and you've done so much for the Bitcoin community, I think you could probably ask for $3,000 a month and very easily get that. And you can put it towards anything you want every single month. And that's the whole idea of it. So the question would be, what do you want to see done in the Bitcoin world? And how much would it cost on a monthly basis?
Yeah, unfortunately I don't have an easy answer for that. All the things that I want to see happening, people are working on. So that's the good news. Maybe something to help people in other countries though too. Like if I can talk about economics or moral philosophy or maybe politics a little bit more. One real interesting point that another economist made is when they're talking about welfare and social programs. In the United States, for example, they take money from rich people and give it to poor people in the United States. But this economist's point was that a stranger is a stranger. So why should I care? Let's say I'm living in California. Why should I care any more about a stranger living in, let's say, Alabama than a stranger living in Mexico City? I've never met the stranger in Alabama. I've never met the stranger in Mexico City. Why should I care more about one stranger than another? And the point there was that if you want to be helping poor people, we should be helping real poor people in countries where they really are poor. So like the poor people in America are incredibly rich compared to the poor people in some third world country somewhere. So if we really want to help the poor, we should be helping the poor in these third world countries, to be honest. So maybe we should get together some money to help introduce Bitcoin and give Bitcoins to people in countries where people really need it a lot more than people in America or Canada or Japan for that matter.
Like a remittance program or something.
Yeah, and I guess that's starting in the Philippines. I read recently there's a local Bitcoin exchange in the Philippines starting. And for people who haven't been, especially in the rural Philippines, it's pretty darn poor over there. And there's lots and lots of Philippine people, Filipinos and Filipinas that work here in Japan and send money back to the Philippines in a similar way to Mexicans working in the United States and sending money back to Mexico. But probably helping people like that would be a worthwhile charitable thing as well. But
there are a couple really cheap Android wallets, like $20 or less for smartphones. We try buying them in bulk, say, for this campaign and selling them to some impoverished countries to get big adoption there. With the people who have pre-loaded wallets, maybe even with some money, you give it to people that need maybe children in school or whatever. They can already get into the space because they have the means to do that, rather than you try to use the dumb wallets or something else.
Yeah, it's like sending a box of hammers.
Roger, we'll talk after this, but we should probably just go with that idea. But yeah, we'll talk after this more about the campaign.
Awesome. So I just want to say, guys, Peter, do you want to ask a question, really?
All right. What do you think about Ripple?
God, you had to pull that up.
So I was, I know Jed McCaleb, the original creator of Ripple, and I helped put up the seed money to start Ripple before anybody really knew what Ripple was going to be. But I think the most telling part or interesting part about that is I was in a meeting with Jed, the creator of Ripple, and all the other guys at the Ripple team there. This is, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago now. And in the meeting there, Jed said to everybody, he said, it's just a matter of time until Bitcoin can do everything that Ripple can do, which I thought was pretty interesting that the creator of Ripple said that. And at this point, there's probably 1,000 or maybe 10,000 developers working on Bitcoin for every one developer working on Ripple stuff. And I think it seems pretty clear that Bitcoin is, has a huge lead over Ripple, and I don't see Ripple being likely to be able to surpass Bitcoin's lead. But all in all, I'm in favor of any technology that gives individuals more control over their financial freedom. But I see Bitcoin, and with things like colored coins, as being the real winner in that space.
Is that just a branding thing? Because the Bitcoin name is more impressive? If Ripple already has the technology, why not? Why wait for Bitcoin to catch up?
I think Bitcoin's already ahead, because what makes money useful is the amount of other people that are willing to use it and are engaged with it. And how many shopping sites are there that accept Ripple? I only know of one offhand. You can use it with a lot of other sites, but you're using a Bitcoin gateway to send the Bitcoins to wherever. So I'm not opposed to Ripple. If people can make it work, that's fine. But I kind of have the same feeling about it as I do about all the other altcoins. We already have this
currency.
Do you see the world? Do you see the world moving towards one currency?
Yeah, I don't think that there's going to be only one, but I think there'll be one predominant one that has the vast majority of market share.
Awesome. One more question, actually. I want Christine to ask her question.
Thank you so much. Okay, so ending on a positive note, there's like a lot of amazing ways that Bitcoin can save the world. Sending money to refugees that currently don't have any way to get money and are 80 miles away from a bank. One of the things that I talk about is we could have solved the carbon credit fraud of $6 billion had we run it through the Bitcoin protocol. So there's lots of really good messages on how Bitcoin can actually be used in a really positive way, but no one's out there talking about those messages and promoting Bitcoin in a really positive way to anybody. So do you have any advice on how we can advance that message so that before Bitcoin is overly controlled or killed, we've got the message out there on how to, the good things about Bitcoin rather than all the negative criminal aspects of it?
Yeah, I think the key is to build Bitcoin tools that allow permissionless innovation. And once people can do things without permission, all these good things that people want to have happen are going to be able to happen. And the key is to not to allow regulators to be able to block these good things from happening. And if it's a battle where they can come in with guns and unplug computers and do it, we're going to lose that battle. So we have to build systems that are distributed all over the world, and there's no single central point of failure. And that's what's required in order to achieve these positive goals that we have. Is we have to make it sure that it's done in a way that can't be stopped by these men, with guns working in buildings with flags out in front. Because they're just human beings, just like the rest of us.
Awesome. Roger, this is a good night call. Everybody say good night to Roger Ver.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Everybody have a great night. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Roger.
Came out.
Thank you, Roger. Have a great night.
Good night.
Cheers, buddy.
Take care.
Nice. All right, guys.